So tonight, our guest speaker is Geoff Tracy, very good friend of mine. He'll be sharing his insights and his career in the restaurant business. He graduated from Georgetown University in 1995 with a degree in theology, and went on to graduate first in his class at the Culinary Institute of America, Hyde Park, New York. And he opened up his original Chef Geoff's restaurant in 2000, commemorated by his hat. He is married to Nora O'Donnell and has 3 kids, 2 twins. 2 are going to be freshmen at Georgetown next year, and his youngest daughter, Riley, will be a rising senior at NCS, National Cathedral School in Washington.
And Riley's worked here for a couple summers, not this summer, but the last 2 summers, so that's always a good thing.
And maybe we will be graced by Nora next summer, who is launching her book, We the Women. So maybe next summer we'll be able to have Nora speak to all of us as she'll have launched her book. But we're going to pass the mic over to our husband, Geoff Tracy. Thank you very much for coming.
I think I have my mic. I'm good. Does this mic not work? Oh, you'll be able to hear me, no problem at all. That's not an issue. You can turn off the hearing aids and everything like that. You'll be good. I'll do it. Yeah. So Jared, thank you very much, and to the Fishers Island Library, thank you very much for having me. I've got my Fishers Island Library card. This place is a great asset to this community. I've been coming to Fishers Island for. My first rental was about 18 years ago, but I actually came before that. My children, I had 3 kids in 13 months. Or I did, my wife did. I was just kind of observing. But we had them, they were born in May, and we rented a house down on West Harbor for, I don't know, like 2 weeks or something like that. And they were there when they were like, under 3 months old, and they, we have pictures of them in little Fishers Island sweaters and stuff like that. So this place is very near and dear to my heart. It's a fantastic community. I come up here for the summer, and you do the traditional wave as you drive by somebody, and then I go back to Washington D.C. and I just keep waving at people, and then they're just like this. So like you got to know where you are, and so I have spent a lot of time in Washington D.C. I moved there in 1991 to go to Georgetown University, And I own 3 restaurants in Washington D.C. I have so it's a Chef Geoff's West End, and Leah's, and then I have another restaurant at Dulles International Airport. It's the largest grossing restaurant at Dulles International Airport. It's a licensing agreement, and then I also do the food service for the Jesuits at Georgetown University, which is really my only chance of getting into heaven is feeding these guys. But it's good. It's good. And so I did just celebrate 25 years in business. And so you're old when thank you. You're old when you start receiving Lifetime Achievement Awards. So that's sort of where I am. But with all that experience, in fact, my first job in the restaurant business was almost 34 years ago, right up here in West Hartford, Connecticut, is where I grew up. And so I figure with all that experience, in retrospect, what I should do is open up a consulting firm called So You Want to Own a Restaurant. And what my potential clients would do is they would come to me and they're like, so we're thinking about owning a restaurant. And I would say to them, I think this is great. I think I can really help you save money going forward in your career. And I bring them in and I say, first we have to take care of the fee. And my fee's $100,000. And you'd have to write me the check, and I would cash it and make sure it all goes through before I sat down with them to give them all the wisdom and experience that I have. And with that $100,000, I say, listen, I just cashed your check for $100,000. I'm going to save you a lot of money. Do not go into the restaurant business. Because it is a difficult, challenging business. It is a terrible way to try to make money. But there's a lot of upsides, and so I'll give you some of the challenges and some of the tough stuff. But in the end, there's a reason I've been doing this, on my own for 25 years, and I really do enjoy the business. But let's get started right up here in West Hartford, Connecticut is sort of where the whole project got started. And I work for the Max Restaurant Group in West Hartford, Connecticut, owned by Rich Rosenthal, a very successful restaurateur in Hartford, up in Springfield by the Basketball Hall of Fame, and now in Palm Beach. He just recently sold his business. But I had worked 2 summers in a row, my sophomore year in high school, my junior year in high school, and my dad, who's a CPA partner at Arthur Andersen, had got me a job with in a law firm my sophomore year, and I spent the entire summer working for a law firm, and I decided, I was like, I do not want to do this. And then the summer of my junior year, he got me a job at Arthur Andersen, and I had to kind of work on a mailing list or something like that. I don't know, some stupid job there was no windows. And I, after 2 months of that, I was like, there is no way I want to do this. And then in my summer before I went to Georgetown University, there was this new cool restaurant in town called Max on Main. And it was really sort of a cutting edge restaurant at the time. And it would be a standard bistro to all of us today, but it was really, really cool. And my mom helped me get the job because she ate there all the time, and she knew the owner. And so I take this job as a busser, and my job is to bring bread to the table, fill up water, and basic stuff. I kind of have to work with the kitchen a little bit. I have to kind of work with the front of the house a little bit, and I found out that I just absolutely loved it. I loved it because every time I put fresh bread and a little olive oil or filled up someone's water, the result was somebody was happy, somebody was smiling, and they were having a good time, because going out to dinner can be a lot of fun. And it was in kind of the edgy part of town, and so one of my other jobs was, this is back in the day in which people would break into cars and steal car radios. Remember the 90s, the 80s and the 90s? And so I'd have to sweep up the glass from the parking lot and, kind of keep it going. And so, my first week went by and things were going really well. And I was like, I really had my hand on the whole thing. And I was doing work with another busboy. So the two of us kind of, split duties. Sometimes on the busy shifts, we'd work together. And one night, maybe 7 days into it, he said, dude, I am getting out of here. I hate this job. I sell cocaine. And he goes, I can make so much more money selling cocaine than I can filling up people's, ice waters. And I was like, wow, okay, all right. And he did not show up for work the next day. And so what I did is I went up to because I was like, probably not a long-term career selling cocaine, so maybe I'll stick with this. And so I went up to the owner. I said, Rich, I know we're one busser down, but I can handle it for the rest of the summer. And so what I used to do is split the tips with him, the cocaine guy. And now I didn't have to split it because he was like, okay, he's like, I won't hire another busser. I said, I'll bust my butt. I'll cover the entire restaurant. And that's what I did for the entire summer. And so I made just a ton of money, in my opinion, at the time.
Not as much as the cocaine.
Yeah. But what's the long run play there, right? It's like, that was the war on drugs period. It's not like now. So in any case, I made a lot of money, and all that money went to go buy beer and enjoy my last summer before I went to Georgetown University. So that was a very unique experience. And as I got to the end of the year, Rich, who again is just one of the great restaurateurs of New England, has me over on my last day, and he says, "Geoff, you were awesome." He goes, "I love your parents. I loved having, you work here, at the restaurant. You were good. You were high energy. You're always smiling." And he's like, "You're going to go to Georgetown University." He's like, "You got into Georgetown University. I want you to go out, study really hard there. I want you to become a doctor or a lawyer." He goes, "But just stay out of the restaurant business." He goes, "It's too hard. You don't want this kind of grind." And to me, as an idiotic 17 or 18-year-old boy, I was like, no, that's a challenge. So the challenge flag had been raised. So I left that opportunity and then went to Georgetown University. And Georgetown University was fantastic because I can take a lot of good things away from Georgetown University, and first and foremost is my wife. So first week at Georgetown University, I meet my wife, and happily ever after type of thing. The second thing I learned was I was in the business school, and in your freshman year of Georgetown Business School, you really only have to take one big business course, and I took accounting. And I had the best professor at Georgetown University teaching accounting. His name was Professor Houston. And he was well known as the best professor. And instantly I hated that class. And I knew that accounting, that my dad's career path, that 40 years at Arthur Andersen, becoming partner, that was not going to happen. The other thing that I did is I worked at a little student-owned grocery store called Vital Vittles, and at Vital Vittles right there on campus, and it's still there. And I became the general manager of it over the 3 years that I worked there. And you don't have anybody else. There was no adults working. It's just students, student-owned. And I really learned a lot about managing people and being very customer-centric. And so that was a fantastic experience for me. And I basically say that Vital Vittles sort of got me even more on the path to sort of owning restaurants and doing that kind of thing. And then at the end of Georgetown University, because my experience to my life all the way through I was 22 years old was that at the end of every spring, summer would come and you'd do some work or something like that. And then the following year, school would start again. But that apparently doesn't happen in your senior year of college. You're supposed to go get a job after that. And my friends were all telling me things like, there is a job posting fairs and stuff like that, and I didn't catch any of those while I was at Georgetown. It's probably because of my wife, and I was just chasing her around campus all the time. But so in the end, I really had no plan for what I was going to do next. And my friends are like, "I'm going to work for Morgan Stanley," and I'm like, "Who's Morgan Stanley?" And so their ignorance was a strong element there. So I thought I would do something, romantic to find myself. Like I'm still closer to the 60s, than we are now back there in the early 1990s. And so I thought I would do something like bike across America on a bicycle during the summer in the southern route. So I started in San Diego and bicycled on a bike, 2 wheels, no motor or anything like that, all the way to Florida. And I started with 2 people. One person quit in New Mexico, the other person quit in Texas, and I did the final part all by myself. And you know, no cell phone. I literally had a map. Like I had 7 maps of the different routes, and you know, because that's a good way to find yourself. And so I get all the way to Florida, and all I found was a lot of rash and a lot of smell. And I did it in 40 days, which is a good clip. And I get to Florida, and I'm like, okay, that didn't work. I need to get back to my girlfriend in Washington, D.C. And so I jump on a Greyhound bus, and a Greyhound bus is a pretty tough place to be. But I was the freak show on the Greyhound bus. Because as I'm walking up, people are like, no, the seat's taken, this seat's taken, this seat's taken. And so I didn't find anything. And so I come back to Washington, D.C., I take a shower and stuff like that. So one day, Nora is like, let's go walk around Georgetown, the proper M Street. You know, so we're walking down M Street, and I don't have a plan. I don't have a job. And she's getting started in journalism, and that worked out. And so we're walking down the street, and she's like, I'm going to go into Victoria's Secret. And I'm like, I don't know if I can walk around there. I'm a 22-year-old man, a little odd. You know, I mean, Victoria's Secret was a little edgy at the time. It's maybe not so edgy now. But I was like, I'm not going in there. So I stayed on the sidewalk, and I ran into a family friend. And his name's Tom Meyer. And Tom Meyer was he was the corporate chef, and then the vice president, and then the president of the Clyde's Restaurant Group in Washington, D.C. And he was an old family friend from over here in West Hartford and Groton Long Point. And I was like, dude, very good to see you. You have a really cool job. Can I take you out to lunch and pick your brain? And he looked at me, he's like, Geoff, you're 22 years old, you have no job, I'll take you out to lunch. And so Tom and I sat down, and like, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, the restaurant business, and I'm thinking about like, okay, this is a good in. This is a good in. And so we sat down, and he's like, okay, Geoff. He goes, it's not a normal business. He goes, you're from a really normal family, and this is probably not something you should be doing. But I'd be willing to like help you out a little bit. I'll give you a little bit of direction. And I'm like, can you give me a job? And he's like, okay, I'll give you a job. And so he got me a job at the Old Ebbitt Grill, which is the largest grossing restaurant in Washington, D.C. It does like 45 million in sales now. At the time, it was doing like 20 million. It's the most busiest restaurant I've ever worked in. And I got a job for $8 an hour. And I was like, awesome, I'm gainfully employed. And my dad and my mom must have been like, what did we spend all that money at Georgetown University? But that's sort of where I started. And Tom basically told me something that's really started about people trying to get into the restaurant business. He says, you have to work in it for a little while just to prove that you're crazy enough to work in it for a little while. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And so I worked for a while, did the whole thing, and then I said, okay, Tom, what's next? He goes, well, if you want to take it to the next level, he goes, you've proven yourself crazy enough, you have to go to either the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, or you have to go to Cornell to do the business school. He goes like, I did the Culinary Institute of America. I'm like, okay, I'll go there because I don't want to go to Cornell. Because I had done a lot of academic stuff. I wanted to do a little hands-on work. So I go to the Culinary Institute of America. I brought my dad there. I convinced him to let me go to the Culinary Institute as a sort of a graduate program. And I learned a gazillion things. 2-year program. You got knives, fire, great food, alcohol. I mean, the whole thing is a complete blast. It's a place where people go who can't figure out other things. You know, sometimes because they're like terrible students or they're just messed up or something like that. And we all kind of show up at this like beautiful place that's right on the Hudson River. And I learned a lot of things. And one of them, and I took great classes in cooking, but I learned a lot from like some of the business classes and a couple other classes. And I had a business class called Cost Control, and I had a professor named John Canner. And John Canner, on day one of Cost Control, said, "Okay, we're gonna define what a restaurant is." He goes, "We're gonna come up with a definition of a restaurant." And he goes, "This is a definition I want you all to understand." And he says, "A restaurant is a business that's open to the public, that serves food and beverage for the sole purpose of making a profit." And people were so turned off by it. All the students, because everybody's a dreamer in there. They're like creative and stuff like that. But he explained to us over the course of the 2 weeks for the class, he said, a lot of people get into a lot of trouble in the restaurant business because they can't seem to make a profit. They do it because this is what they're passionate about or what they're excited about. But he said, first and foremost, you got to make a profit. He goes, once you make a profit, then you can do everything else. You can do all the dreamy stuff, the creative stuff, the exciting stuff. But first you have to come up with a business plan that is going to make a profit. And so I credit John Canner. I have not made a profit every single month for 25 years. There are plenty of months where I've lost money. But overall, I've been able to keep the business alive for 25 years. And survival matters in the restaurant business, because once you get a little bit behind, then a little bit behind, and then you miss a rent, and then you miss a payment to a vendor, then you start getting in trouble.
And then you have COVID.
Well, then you have COVID. That part of the story is coming. And then I had Professor Gold, who taught culinary law, which is a class that you don't think. And he's like, remember just one thing from this class: never sign anything without a lawyer. Very smart, very smart. I did my graduation speech because I was the valedictorian of the class, and I talked about the need. I'm 20-something years old at the time. The need to find discomfort. I said, once you become comfortable in your business is the moment you've stopped learning. And so you have to find ways to be uncomfortable. And so that was my graduation speak. And then I went off into the world and tried to figure out things. While I was in culinary school, I did an externship, a very influential externship at one of the top 3 restaurants in Washington, D.C. It was called Galileo. It was owned by Roberto Dona, who's a very, very successful chef and a terrible business owner. He closed a gazillion restaurants. And so one of the things I learned, I was working at his flagship restaurant that I worked so hard to get this internship in. And I'm working there and I'm doing all these different things and enjoying food that was totally surreal. But one of the things that sticks with me is that the chef there his name's Todd Gray, owns a bunch of restaurants himself, but Todd was the executive chef and had to deal with Roberto's lack of business. And so what would happen is they would order all this like beautiful fish in from Alaska and stuff like that, and it would all come in, but it was all COD. And so there was a little office in the kitchen, and it had a glass window in it. And so Todd would write the check to the company that was coming, $1,200 or something like that, put it right on top of the desk so that you could see it through the window. Then he would take his keys and then lock the door from the outside. He had another set of keys, then close it. And then when the guy came in to bring in the fish, he'd haul all the fish in, and he'd be like, yeah, I got your check right here. And then he'd try to open the office door. He'd be like, my keys, I locked my keys. It's there, the check is right there. So I learned that technique as like, if that's what's going on, it's probably not an ideal thing for your business. So in any case, so let's see what happened next.
Buying one of his restaurants.
I ended up buying, yeah, that was my first restaurant. In any case, so after graduating, I was a sous chef in a very busy restaurant. I was a dining room manager in a really nice restaurant. And at that point, I was 26 years old, and I quit. And I said, I'm ready to go on and do my own thing. And in part because I had gone back to Tom Meyer, I said, Tom, how many years should I work for other people before I start my own restaurant? And Tom said, Geoff, he goes, I said, 10, 20 years, should I work for other people? And he goes, Geoff, this is a young man's game. He goes, in 10, 20 years, you're gonna have a wife, you're gonna have kids, you're gonna have a dog, you're gonna have a mortgage, and so you're not gonna wanna risk anything. And he said to me, he goes, how much money do you have, Geoff? And I said, I have $5,000. And he goes, the time is now, Geoff. The time is now. He goes, you can risk $5,000. And so that was age 26 was the last time I had any W-2 income. The most W-2 income I have ever made was $39,000. Somehow I saved $5,000 of that. And I looked around, and with the help of my dad, I looked at a bunch of different restaurants, and I finally found a spot that happened to be owned by this guy that I had worked for, the guy who never paid his bills. And so he had another restaurant that got a terrible review and went out of business, and it was in this beautiful neighborhood in Washington, D.C. And that's where I opened the first Chef Geoff's. And I like to say, doing anything entrepreneurial requires a leap of ignorance, right? So there is no way you would enter the restaurant business understanding, or any business, understanding all the challenges that you might face, right? So a good entrepreneur always should have a level of ignorance. And I was loaded with ignorance. And so I had all these plans, and I wanted to do all these things. I had no money, but I got some people from the Culinary Institute of America, who were classmates of mine, to join me. I had 4 of them join me. I hired some other people, and I got this whole thing going. And it was the night before. It was June 1st, 2000, and we opened on June 2nd. And we cleaned up the whole restaurant. We could afford paint. Right, that was it. It was pretty simple, but we got it going, and we all believed in each other, and it was a motley crew of people, some of whom are still working for me, which is amazing. So you're trying to get all ready to go, and so day one is there, and we're about to open for lunch, and first person comes, and we are at attention, ready to go. And the first person comes through, and she comes up to us, and she's like, "Can I get a burger to go?" And we had not thought about to-go materials. This is not the days of DoorDash or anything like that. And so we somehow managed to execute that order, but I call that infinite adaptability, right? So you have to understand that things are just not always going to go your way, and you have to adapt to them. So I survived that first day. The hoods didn't totally work, and the kitchen filled up with smoke, and all sorts of things went wrong. And I'm sure the service was terrible. But we, at the end of the day, we're like, okay, we'll get through it and make it happen. So I get through actually the first full month. I'm working 100 hours a week, 7 days a week. Just it's so much, but I'm so into it, and my team is so into it, and we're like just cranking. So it's like coffee, work, alcohol, coffee, yeah, and just do the whole rotation. You know, well, I didn't call it my old busser friend, no. And so we get to that end of the first month, and my dad, CPA Arthur Anderson, is my sort of bookkeeper. So he does the books for the first month and does the financial report. And he reports, he goes, Geoff, you made a profit in your first month. I'm like, wow. He goes, you made $61. And considering I wasn't taking a salary, it's the rough numbers, right? That's $2 a day plus a little change. But it is what it is. So I decided to try to keep growing the business, and so we put signs up all around, and this is before social media or anything like that. And I had all sorts of marketing techniques, and one of which was the use of the fax machine, because the fax machine was hot back then. It's high technology, and I would fax to every real estate firm, lawyers' offices, and stuff like that. I'd say, here are the menus you requested, and then send them the menus, because everybody's advertising what their fax number is. So I just keep faxing. And I would also use the line, for CIA trained chefs. And to me, who had gone to the Culinary Institute of America, CIA was the Culinary Institute of America. But in Washington, D.C., the CIA is something completely different. And so I explained to people, I said, guys, that's pies, not spies. But there were a lot of people in the early years who thought the restaurant was run by a bunch of spooks, which is not the case. But the State Department did come to me, because we were right down the road from the Russian embassy. So we're like half mile from the Russian embassy. And this is 2000, this is before 9/11, and our focus sort of switched to different types of terrorists. The Russians were the problem. And so the State Department came to me and they're like, listen, you have this restaurant, it's right near the Russian embassy, and all of us at the State Department would like to meet some of these Russians. I'm like, okay. They're like, we will put ads in the Diplomat, which is a newspaper at the time, and we would like to invite all these people to come to your restaurant, and we will pay you. And I was like, this is my first private party. I'm like, let's do it. And so we did vodka tastings multiple times, and I helped the State Department meet with a bunch of young Russian people from the embassy. And I had ads all over the Diplomat. It really helped grow the business. And so for CIA people, Culinary Institute of America actually got to work with the CIA. So that's an interesting one. So as I grew over the first group of years, I had one restaurant, and then 9/11 actually hit, and caused a gazillion restaurants to go out of business in Washington, D.C., mine not being one of them, but I took advantage and took over one downtown. So I added one to that. And I was good. I was really good as a one restaurateur. When it came to two restaurants, I was good. So I was great with one, good with two. And then in 2006, I opened my third restaurant, and I found myself to be pretty bad operating three restaurants. And, so that's something an entrepreneur learns, that they may be good at some things, but when it starts getting a little bit big, they're going to need some help. And so I realized in 2006 that I needed some help. And I ended up hiring my brother, who helped come on and continues to work with me today. And he helped create all the systems that allow me to come to Fisher's Island and play golf and tennis all summer. So thank you, Chris. It's just different operating three or four operations than it is operating one. So, and I did feel like I was getting close to going out of business. In 2007, I had 3 or 4 restaurants, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. And my old alma mater called me back up and said, hey, listen, would you speak on a panel of people who are Georgetown graduates, and talk to some of the younger students? I said, I'd be honored. I mean, that's fantastic. And so I went and speaking on a panel, and I'm thinking, I'm pretty much the top dog here. I've got 3 or 4 restaurants. This is good. And I told my story, and I said the importance of appealing to a large audience and having lots of big menu with lots of different choices and stuff like that. And a couple boys come up to me afterwards, and they're like, "Hey, we really appreciate your talk, and you had talked about having a big menu." And I was like, "Yeah, I think it's important for success." And they said, "Well, we're in the business school, and we just came up with a proposal to open a restaurant." And I was like, "Great. What's the idea behind the restaurants?" And they're like, "Salad." I'm like, "Salad? Okay, and they're like, no, we just make salad." And I was like, "That sounds like a terrible idea." And I told them as such. And I was like, "Well, the good thing for you guys, it's just for a project for school." And they're like, "No, we already signed a lease." And I was like, "Okay, all right, good luck, guys. I'll see you later." Those guys went on to open Sweet Green, which has a 1.5 billion market cap right now. So what I should have done is said, "Can I invest?" That's just one of a gazillion times where you think you know something and then you don't know something. So in any case, it's all good. And then as we sort of move into sort of the last 6 or 7 years, there was a period there in which I merged with another restaurant group because I thought I needed to grow, and that didn't work. That was a really, really challenging period. The 2 people that I merged with, it was me and my brother. And I at that point, I basically, at the merger, I'd given my brother half of the shares of my company, and we merged with these 2 guys, sort of a merger of equals. And it was a father-son team, and they were both accountants, and they ran a soulless business. It had no soul. And I was like, I'm ever the optimist. I was like, I can fix this. And I absolutely could not. And so it was a really, really tough period of time. And I ended up buying them out. And I told my brother, I said, "Listen, it's going to be good. We'll buy them out. We'll move on. I think the future is really bright." And that was right at the end of 2019. And so we basically, it's March of 2020, and the mayor is shutting down all full service restaurant operations. Tony Fauci is a regular customer of mine. He lives about 4 blocks away from my restaurant, and Tony stopped coming to my restaurant for 2 years. I was happy when he finally came back, but he was ordering out a lot. And COVID was one of those periods in which infinite adaptability is a paramount moment, right? You've got a business. So I went to every single one of our landlords. We cut deals. There were times I said, "Okay, well then throw me out. What are you going to do? Like, you're going to find somebody else to be in there?" And so you had to battle. And at that point, I didn't feel like I had a lot going. Like, I didn't need to be there a lot. But when COVID hit, I felt like I had to be there. And I figured out which teammates of mine wanted to work, wanted to stay, wanted to be part of it, which ones were scared, which is fine. And they left. But the people that raised their hands weren't always the people I expected. We went from 250 employees down to 0 employees. And then we started hiring people back, 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, 20 people. And then we kind of redid it. We did comfort meals and shipped out boxes, and we just sort of changed our whole thing. At first it was like, how do we sell all our wine inventory and all that stuff? By 3 weeks into it, we were feeding people. We turned our dining rooms into little markets where people could buy milk and toilet paper and bottles of tequila and margaritas to go. And so we fully adapted to that whole, what's that? I sold gloves, bleach. Like there was nothing in culinary school that said at any point I was going to sell to a single person like a quart of margarita, a bottle of wine, a gallon of bleach, and 2 rolls of toilet paper to go. So that was not really what I expected, but coming through it and surviving it, and we were just the right size business that the government wanted to take care of. It turned out to be a very successful period, but it was a matter of survival, and it was super high stress. So, earlier this year we celebrated on June 2nd, 2025, our 25th anniversary, and I received some awards, and I have the sort of Lifetime Achievement Award, and I have the skills and experience to open up that consulting firm. That, but the reality is, and I was up receiving an award for the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington. It was a milestone award. It's 25th anniversary award. And there were other people getting the award, and they were talking about how hard it is and how challenging it is, and it was almost a little bit negative. And I got up and I said, I totally understand what you're all saying, because I've been through it. Everybody who's been through the 25 or the 35 or the 50-year award, they all know how difficult it is. But all jobs are tough. And we get to take care of people. And we're really not in the food and beverage business. We're in the hospitality business. Yes, we have to put it all together, as Professor Cantor says, to make a profit. But at the end of the day, if we can take care of that, we get to take care of customers, we get to take care of our employees, and we get to have a lot of fun doing it, because being in a restaurant is supposed to be fun. And my motto when I started the restaurant was great food, libation, and merriment. And I think I've been doing that for 25 years, and I really don't feel like it's been a job. It's been a career. And I'm excited about the future. I don't know if I have another 25 years in me, but I am in the process of working with Georgetown University to sign another lease. I've got another sort of little business thing working as well. And so I really do enjoy it, and it's been very fulfilling. And I'm happy to have made it. So